Retcon, short for retroactive continuity. The definition being the alteration of previously established facts in the continuity of a fictional work. To simplify, it means changing parts of a pre-existing story by adding or removing new details from the original source. It's often used in superhero comic book media to change or reboot specific elements of a character or story that didn't bode well with audience members when the original material was published. In a way, it's kinda like an undo button to replace pre-existing failures and redo those failures in hopes that the new material will be successful. Kinda seems like a lazy tool for story writers if you think about it. But DC Comics has had over thousands of retcons over its 84 years of publishing, and it's still viewed as having the greatest comic book continuities of all time. So why is that the case? Why are retcons so useful? Today, I would like to explore the use of retcons in specifically creating and presenting a villain of a story. Although the hero often takes the spotlight when presenting a story, it is often a complex and well-written villain character that holds the backbone of the narrative by presenting the hero with various challenges they must overcome in order to move the story along. For this video, we will be studying a well-written villain that has a fair share of retcons in their continuity. We will be looking at the Reverse Flash, otherwise known as Eobard Thawne, the arch-enemy of DC Comics' The Flash, to explore the use of retcons and its overall impact on their character and the overarching story presented in comic book media as well as its TV adaptation.
This is gonna be fun.
One key element that creates a compelling villain is creating a strong force of motivation and drive for the villain to act on. To look at the Reverse Flash's motivation, we have to first cover his origin into villainy. Let's look at his first origin, which was showcased in The Flash issue 139, published in 1963. His origin story here was rather a simple and one-dimensional one. His original origin goes like this. Eobard Thawne is a man born in the 25th century. After finding the Flash's supersuit in a time capsule, he finds a way to reverse engineer it to grant him super speed to be the greatest criminal of the futuristic 25th century. However, he was later stopped by the Flash, who coincidentally time traveled to his era. And that's all that there was to his origin story. It wasn't until the storyline The Return of Barry Allen, published in 1993, where his original origin was retconned out to be more interesting and complex. In this new retcon, Eobard Thawne is still a man from the 25th century, but he wasn't just an ordinary man like his pre-retcon origin. Instead, he was a fanatic who idolized the Flash of the 21st century. Like his pre-retcon self, he manages to stumble upon the Flash's old supersuit and decides to reverse engineer it to become the Flash himself and a hero of the 25th century. Wanting to learn from the original hero himself, he uses a time machine called the Cosmic Treadmill to travel back to the 21st century to meet his idol and to learn how to be a great hero. However, through time travel wackiness, when he lands into the 21st century, he discovers that his destiny wasn't to become a hero. Instead, he discovers that his destiny was to become the Flash's greatest enemy. Readers of the Flash comic book already knew this, however, due to the fact that they've already read stories where the future version of Eobard Thawne fought numerous times against the Flash before the storyline. I know, time travel is confusing, but just go along with it. This, along with the side effects of traveling through time, drove Eobard mad. Envious of the Flash's destiny to become one of the world's greatest superheroes, and him having to settle with being a villain, he snaps. Twisted by all the events that transpired, he embraces villainy and vows to make the Flash's life a living hell for forcing him to become the villain of the story.
Why do you hate me so much? I didn't always. I was obsessed with you. For so long, I wanted to be the Flash. I spent years figuring out how you came to be. Duplicated the reaction. And it worked. I became like you.
So what happened?
This ability to travel through time revealed the truth. My fate was to become your greatest enemy. I was never going to be the Flash. So I became the reverse of everything that you were. The more people you saved, the more you were loved, the more I had to take from you.
As you can tell, the level of complexity and depth that went into his new retcon origin is considerably different compared to the level that was presented in the Reverse Flash's first appearance in The Flash issue 139. In that issue, he only became evil for the sake of being evil. It's bland and boring. Through the use of the retcon, there is more depth to the character. He is written almost in a tragic way, where a good man was twisted into becoming evil due to fate and chance. All he wanted was to meet his idol, but by meddling with time and actually meeting with him, he inadvertently becomes his worst enemy. The retcon provides a more solid ground to the overall Flash continuity, as well as providing readers a better, deeper explanation on why a villain character is a villain. For the post-retcon Reverse Flash, the Flash is the hero that he could never be. In order to cope for that unchangeable fact, he embraces the villain that he was destined to be and makes the Flash's life a living hell. To the Reverse Flash, the Flash was a very personal being to him. To him, the Flash was the man that drove him into becoming the villain that he is. But from the Flash's perspective, he was just an everyday villain that simply hated the Flash. While the hero was very personal to the villain himself wasn't very personal to the hero. This single fact led to a chain of retcons that would change the face of the DC universe for years to come. These chain of retcons began with the story arc, Flash Rebirth, which was published in 2009. In this storyline, it is revealed that Barry Allen's mother had been killed during his childhood and his father framed for her murder. This was a huge retcon, as before the storyline, Barry's mother had passed away well after he had become the Flash. As the title of the story arc shows, this was a rebirth of the Flash's story. But where does the Reverse Flash fit into all of this, you ask? Well, it was actually the Reverse Flash who traveled back in time to Barry's childhood and killed his mother. Things just got very personal for the Flash. Not only had the Reverse Flash meddled with time, but he had altered the Flash's history. The Flash now has a very personal connection with the Reverse Flash and a driving motivation to stop him. He wants to bring the man who actually killed his mother and get his father out of prison. The retcon created in Flash Rebirth builds up a more personal connection between the hero and the villain. But that's not all that it does. After all, we still need to talk about one of DC's biggest retcons ever created, and of course, it centers around both the Flash and the Reverse Flash, and that event is Flashpoint.
So, what should we call this brave new world that you've whipped up for us? I was thinking Flashpoint.
Flashpoint was a DC event that was published in 2011. The primary focus is on the Flash after he decides to run back in time in order to save his mother from being killed by the Reverse Flash. Things don't go the way they plan, however, as when he returns to the present after saving his mother, he finds that the world has been transformed into a doomsday world. Saving his mother from the Reverse Flash caused a chain reaction of events that spread across the DC universe, altering histories of many beloved DC heroes. In this Flashpoint timeline, it was Bruce Wayne who was shot in the alleyway in Gotham, causing his mother, Martha Wayne, to go mad, becoming the Joker, and his father, Thomas Wayne, to take up the mantle of Batman. Instead of landing in the farmlands of Smallville, Superman crashes into Metropolis and is taken in by the government to be experimented on. Wonder Woman and her fellow Amazons are in a war against Aquaman and the people of Atlantis, which caused millions of fatalities all across the world. By saving his mother's life, the Flash had altered the universe for the worst. The Reverse Flash later comes into the story to teach Barry Allen a very important lesson. This leads to our final element in what makes a compelling villain. Although the Reverse Flash was the driving force that pushed the Flash to save his mother from death, it was ultimately the Flash's action that gave birth to this Doomsday world. During the final act of the story, the Reverse Flash confronts the Flash and tells him that he was responsible. And instead of him being the villain this time around, it was the Flash that was the villain.
What did you do to the world? Oh, Barry. That's the beauty of all this. I didn't do any of it. You did.
during the story, the Reverse Flash is able to show how easy it is for someone to become a villain like himself. The Reverse Flash was supposed to represent the mirror opposite of what the Flash was supposed to be. But during this retcon, the lines were blurred. Eventually, the Flash realizes that the only way to fix everything is to go back in time and stop his past self from saving his mother. It was only after the confrontation with the Reverse Flash that he realized that he needs to accept his mother's death, and that even with incredible powers that he has, some things are just out of his control. He is able to grow as a character to not dwell on the past, and instead focus on saving the people in the present and the future. While the Flash seemed to be able to fix everything from his perspective, from the audience perspective, things were not the same. This was the case because the authors of the DC Comics universe used this event to create the biggest retcon in the universe yet, and that was the rise of the New 52. DC Comics was able to use this time travel element in Flashpoint to actually reboot and restart the DC universe. While other big and well-known retconning initiatives, such as Crisis on Infinite Earths, gave rise to new stories and changes in the DC continuity, an entire reboot of the franchise was something that had never been attempted. This ties back to our original question on why retcons are so useful in storytelling. In a broad sense, retcons are a useful tool to create new, interesting stories out of already existing continuities. Whether the past story was a poorly received failure, or a well-liked success, a retcon can be used to add further depth to it. However, although the wide array of retcons I talked about were used to develop and add various things into the DC continuity, there is also a more literal reason on why retcons are used by authors. That reason being is to simply draw more audience members into that media. If you take a look at the events of Flash Rebirth and Flashpoint, the authors were able to use and write the story elements of the Reverse Flash in a unique way to mold and shape an interesting story toward a specific direction that they wanted to go. This ultimately led to the New 52, a reboot in the DC continuity which brought an array of new stories and origins. However, the creation of the New 52 wasn't simply planned out to create more stories. No. DC intended to create the New 52 in hopes to bring new audience members to buy their comic books. By rebooting the universe and forcing a restart to all their stories, it is more likely that new readers will be able to jump in, since pre-retcon continuity no longer matters after the reboot. While retcons have been used as a unique storytelling tool, if you look at it from the publisher's perspective, it is simply a tool that can be used to create storylines or events that will draw audience members to buy their comic books. It's a bit meta if you think about it, but it all makes sense. DC creates a one-dimensional villain called the Reverse Flash. They give him more depth by retconning his original backstory to give him a deeper and more complex characterization. They create retcons to add a complex relationship between the hero and the villain of the story, and ultimately, writers use those story elements as an excuse to create a retcon that allows them to branch out and gather more readers. Using retcons might look like a cheap business move, but it's effective and it works. In fact, most comic book readers like myself actually enjoy them. As long as compelling and interesting stories and characters are being created, I don't think retcons won't be going away for quite a while. In fact, they might just stick around until the 25th century.